The Roaring Twenties. The 1920s era went by such names as the Jazz Age and the Roaring Twenties. The era embodied the beginning of modern America. The social, political, and economic characterizations made the new decade of the Roaring Twenties a time of change for everyone.
The 18th Amendment to the Constitution had prohibited the manufacture, transport, and sale of liquor. Prohibitionists thought that it would alleviate social problems and better the economy. However, many people disliked the law and had nightclubs called speakeasies. Gangsters took control of the illegal distribution of liquor, called bootlegging. The Volstead Act, a law meant to uphold the 18th Amendment, was difficult due to lack of funding, short staffing, and a disregard for a law that was deemed ridiculous. Lacking public support, the federal government was unable to enforce prohibition. Flappers were northern urban single young middle-class women who had an unmistakable look with their bobbed hair and use of makeup and cigarettes. Many had steady jobs in the changing American economy. By night, flappers engaged in the active city nightlife and frequented jazz clubs and vaudeville shows. Speakeasies were a common destination as the new women of the 20s adopted the same carefree attitude toward prohibition as men did. The new music and dances were fast-paced and energetic like the optimistic 1920s themselves. They were an escape from the horror of war, an opportunity to release bottled-up emotions created by the restricted lifestyles forced on the public by the war effort. The dance that epitomizes the 1920s is the Charleston. Even today, it is still a symbol for the 1920s jazz age. The jazz age produced greats such as Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, and Bessie Smith. The Roaring Twenties brought in a rich period of American writing distinguished by the works of authors like F. Scott Fitzgerald, Ernest Hemingway, Sinclair Lewis, and William Faulkner, as well as many others. The Red Scare during the 20s referred to the fear of communism in the U.S. just before and during the 20s. It is estimated that there were 150,000 anarchists or communists in the U.S. The Sacco and Vanzetti case showed what could happen to people who held radical views. The Red Scare gave way to racism and anti-immigration movements. The KKK targeted blacks as well as people with certain religious views.
The 1920s was a period of impressive economical growth. With the start of gigantic companies such as Ford, who created cars, and continuing companies like Rockefeller's Railroad and Carnegie Steel, thousands of jobs were created. Although the 1930s is a period of depression, the Roaring Twenties gave millions of Americans the chance to own cars, household appliances, and luxuries only the wealthy could afford.
Like so, Ford created jobs and initialized real pay, which inspired women to created more rights. But this goes back to political, which we will cover later.
First, government policies wanted to control, but they couldn't. Laissez-faire was blamed for the stock market crash of 1929, and so on. More than half of the Americans lived in cities and rural areas, but morals dropped as the times got wealthier because dresses became shorter, and as the time continued, 24%. In only 2 years, the crime rate increased by 24%, but in general it was a 54% increase in the rate of 10 years. But as a whole, the Roaring Twenties was a time of growth.
Politics in the 1920s. With the end of the World War I and the passage of the 18th Amendment, Americans entered the distinctive 1920s, an era of Republican leadership, nationalistic and fundamental movements, and changing social conventions. Electing Republican presidents who favored business expansion rather than regulation, the American public enjoyed apparently unlimited prosperity, while fear of radicals and foreigners combined to almost completely close off America to immigration and contributed to the resurgence of hate groups such as the Ku Klux Klan. Religious fundamentalism revived as new moral and social attitudes came into vogue. Additionally, the first radio broadcasts and motion pictures expanded Americans' access to news and entertainment.
In conclusion, the Roaring Twenties is often pictured as a colorful decade full of art expression and new cultural beginnings. Speakeasies and flappers turned urban Americans against rural Americans. Also, the idea of evolution added further conflict. Finally, the Red Scare led to the wave of xenophobia and anti-immigration policies. The Roaring Twenties were without a doubt roaring with tensions and conflicts regarding differing public opinion.